Activity 2 of the Digestive Anatomy Lab is for the torso model, and it says in the thoracic cavity, locate the esophagus as part of the mediastinum, which would be right here at 136, and trace its path inferiorly as it penetrates the diaphragm at the esophageal hiatus. So again, 136, this is the esophagus, and then it's going to pass through the diaphragm here at the esophageal hiatus. So the esophageal hiatus is just the opening of the diaphragm that allows the esophagus to pass through. I already removed the liver and put it off to the side, which is what it asked me to do, and here's the liver right there. And then on the next page, it says, note the muscular diaphragm and its attachment to the abdominal wall. Touch the posterior wall of the abdominal cavity. Here. And the anatomical name for the specific membrane you are touching would be the parietal peritoneum. So that's going to be all on the wall of the cavity. Functionally, this membrane produces serous fluid because it is a serous membrane. Now touch the exterior surface of the stomach, which is here. Okay. And if I were touching the exterior surface of the stomach, what I would be touching, or the membrane I would be touching, would then be the visceral peritoneum. And then view the following external anatomy structures of the stomach as it rests in the abdominal cavity. So I have the stomach right here, and it says to list the greater curvature. This is the greater curvature on the outside here, lesser curvature on the inside. The cardiac region is going to be at this first part of the stomach here, with the lower esophageal sphincter, also known as the gastroesophageal sphincter, also known as the cardiac sphincter. And you can tell it's a sphincter if we look here. This is a thickened circular piece of muscle here that acts as a gate between the esophagus and the stomach. And then we have the fundus. So the fundus would just be the top rounded portion. That is just the fundus. So this is all cardia here, which is the first part of the stomach, but the fundus is the top rounded portion. And then the body is the mid portion here at 167. And then the pyloric region would be down here. This is the last portion of the stomach called the pyloric region. And so then this here would be the pyloric sphincter. Now, I think your lab calls it the pyloric valve. I would call it a sphincter because a sphincter is a round muscle. And so that should be the pyloric sphincter. Okay, so it says to remove the stomach and open it to view the middle, which I have here. And I guess I'll show you both sides. Note the deep mucosal folds here called the rugae. Erosions through the mucosa are called ulcers. So ulcers are when sometimes can be caused by a bacterial infection of Helicobacter pylori, which we'll cover in Digestive 2. But that bacteria can eat through the mucus of the stomach and eat through this muscular wall and actually cause a perforation in the wall of the stomach, which would then be called a perforating ulcer. And then that could lead to peritonitis, because if we have an opening of the stomach wall, the acidic gastric juice that's here in the stomach can leak out into the abdominal cavity, irritating and inflaming and possibly infecting the peritoneum, causing peritonitis. And then the pyloric valve, which is here at the bottom part of the stomach here, and it says when the pyloric valve opens, where does the liquid chyme flow to next? It would be the first part of the intestines, which is here, which would be the duodenum, or you could call it the duodenum. The mesenteries are next on your learn list, and it says to remove the fatty greater omentum, which is here. So you would remove that. That is the greater omentum. It is for vessels, like lymphatic vessels, blood vessels, nerves run through there, and also stores fat. As you remove the transverse colon, identify the transverse mesocolon mesentery. So this right here is the transverse mesocolon mesentery. It is used to anchor that portion of the digestive tract. You should know that ventral mesenteries in general attach organs to the anterior wall. Dorsal mesenteries attach the organs to the posterior wall. And then a mesentery is a double-walled membrane created by the visceral peritoneum extending outward to meet the abdominal wall, or you can say to meet the parietal peritoneum. Either one would be okay with me. The small intestines are next, so I'll go ahead and remove the transverse colon here. And it says, note that the massive coiled small intestines in the anterior right and left lower abdomen quadrants represents the jejunum and the ileum here. There is no set like start and end point to those, so I wouldn't tag those specifically. But you should know duodenum is the first section. The ileum would be the last section that attaches to the cecum over here, and then in the middle would be the jejunum. What keeps this tubular arrangement supported so that the sections of the tubes do not become folded over and blocked? That is this mesentery here on the back side of the intestine. And this is the mesentery, or sometimes known as the mesentery proper. And then next it says, as you remove this portion of the small intestine, notice the blood vessels within the thick mesentery, which is here. What two arteries and two veins do you see? This would be the superior mesenteric artery and vein, and then the inferior mesenteric artery and vein. Next, it says the section of the small intestine named the duodenum here is now laid open before you. So all of this is the duodenum, including this here. Is now laid before you in the abdominal cavity. Open your textbook to open your textbook to the figure that clearly shows this section of the digestive tract. List here the reason for the circular folds that make up the intestinal lining of the duodenum. It really is to increase surface area, enhance absorption, enhance secretion. Notice the raised duodenal papilla where the pancreatic duct empties the pancreatic digestive juices into the duodenum, joins the common bile duct that empties the bile from the gallbladder. So if you look inside here, that would be the major duodenal papilla. So we have the main pancreatic duct here that's going to release some bicarbonate and enzymes. You have the bile duct back here, which is going to release bile. They come together to make the hepatopancreatic ampulla and sphincter, which should be around here on the outside. And then those secretions will be secreted out through this hole right here, which is the major duodenal papilla. So the next part of this lab is to secure an intestinal villi model that represents the surface structures of the intestinal lining. Locate the 4 distinct histological structures of the alimentary canal or GI tract and place your finger on them. So here is the mucosa up here. This all would be mucosa from here down to here. With villi, these are villi here. The brush border would be all on the edge of the simple columnar epithelium. That's all brush border there. And muscularis mucosa. So that's going to be this thin layer of smooth muscle here would be the muscularis mucosa, this here. And then the submucosa is going to be from that muscularis mucosa, which is part of the mucosa here. Everything below that, all of this would be submucosa. With a rich vascular supply. So this right here is came from the superior mesenteric artery. This will eventually form the superior mesenteric vein. So those are those vessels there. And then this is malt here, which is a Peyer's patch specifically, because we know, because these are villi, that this is the small intestine. So this would be a Peyer's patch here. Then we have a thick multi-layered muscularis externa. This is the circular layer of the muscularis externa. This is the longitudinal layer of the muscularis externa. And then out here would be the outermost serosa. But don't forget, now this is small intestine here. We know that because of the villi. But don't forget that the outermost layer of the GI tract wall at the esophagus specifically would be called, this would be called the adventitia there. But because this is the small intestine, we know this is the serosa. Locate the arterial capillary within the villus. Over here. And what are its main 2 functions is to deliver oxygen and to pick up our monosaccharides, amino acids, and nucleotides. The venous capillaries within this villus here will eventually lead to, from here to the superior mesenteric vein, which is going to transport that blood to the liver. And then what are the 2 main functions of the lacteal, which is this green vessel here? The 2 main functions is to pick up excess interstitial fluid to prevent edema, and then to pick up dietary fats or lipids. And what specific epithelial cell type appears to make up the mucosa that interfaces with the lumen of the intestines? The cell type are columnar cells. The tissue type is simple columnar epithelium, but it's specifically asking for the cell type. So those would be columnar cells. So it says to gently open the hinge flap of the cecum of the large intestine, which is here, to view the ileocecal valve inside, which is right there at 182. Now identify the slender appendix, which is going to be this structure here. That is the appendix. Note the pouch-like haustra. So these, plural, would be haustra, which are these little normal pockets here of the large intestine. A single one would be a haustrum. Replace the transverse colon. So we're going to put the transverse colon back. Okay. And with your finger, trace the 4 sections of the colon. So we have the ascending colon going up on the right, transverse colon going from right to left, descending colon coming down the left side, and then where it takes a curve here, that is called the sigmoid colon. Notice on the surface of the mesentery supporting the ascending and descending colon, you'll see the superior, and I have to take that off to see, the superior mesenteric artery and vein on this side, and then the inferior mesenteric artery and vein on that side, which is the left side. And then remove the colon portion of the large intestine, and then remove the rectum portion, opening it into 2 sections. And then it says to use your finger to measure the distance from the anal opening, and imagine the area that can be checked for colorectal cancer. So you could check all in the rectum here for colorectal cancer using a digital exam with the finger, which we will discuss in Digestive System 3.